Tonight on The Wrap, is Trump drawing down in the Middle East? The US president says he's considering winding down his military operation against Iran as the UK approves the use of its bases by America to strike Iranian sites targeting the Strait of Hormuz. But tonight, Donald Trump has said the shipping lane isn't his problem. A special report from our correspondent in southern Lebanon, where women and children are living under the constant threat of Israeli airstrikes. Sky News speaks to a young woman in a Kent hospital with a confirmed case of meningitis. Medical staff say Keely Goodwin is lucky her case was caught early. We take to the skies with the drone squads going airborne to tackle the increasing number of illegal waste dumps across the country. In sport, a dramatic night on the south coast as Bournemouth twice come from behind to hold Manchester United to a 2-2 draw. We discuss the day's biggest stories with Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and Chief Executive of the Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including concerns the Middle East war could lead to soaring borrowing costs for the UK. Good evening, Zoe and Mark. Welcome to you both. Well, we're now at the end of the third week of the Iran war. The country's regime is still standing and the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. But for how long? Tonight, the UK government agreed to let the US use British bases to strike Iranian sites, targeting the key shipping lane. But in the past half hour, Donald Trump said it was up to other nations to protect it. He added that he's considering winding down the military operation in the Middle East while sending more troops to the region. Well, Zoe and Mark, your thoughts on these latest comments from Donald Trump?
There's no making sense of them, because every single normal foreign policy comment relies on a kind of framework of the kind of thing a rational person would do, and you don't have that framework with Donald Trump. So you know, he could be winding down, he could be winding up. There's no knowing. Mark?
Well, it's almost like he had no plan whatsoever while taking the biggest action to upturn the global apple cart that you could possibly imagine. And unfortunately, it leaves more egg on Keir Starmer's face, who arrives as a Johnny-come-lately just in time for Donald Trump to say he's off. Well,
let's bring in now US correspondent Mark Stone, who's in Washington for us now. And yet again, we are left second-guessing President Trump. Where does he stand tonight?
Second guessing for sure, and as you just said, I mean, it looks as though this is the clearest indication yet of an off-ramp. But this is a president who changes his mind sometimes by the minute, who contradicts himself minute by minute, and who also bluffs when he wants to, when he needs to. Look, it's 3 weeks to the evening since Donald Trump surprised everyone and chose that moment when the talks were taking place in Geneva between the Americans and the Iranians. He chose that moment to ditch the talks and to launch military action alongside the Israelis. 3 weeks on, I think we do, as I say, have a clearer indication than any before that he is done with this. Now, is that because he genuinely believes he has achieved all his aims, or is it actually because some of the aims have been achieved and the unintended consequences, the global economic consequences, have been so profound and so quick? When he was on the South Lawn an hour or so ago, he said, we've knocked out their Navy, their Air Force, we've knocked out their anti-aircraft, we've knocked out everything, we are roaming free. He then got on board Marine One, flew to Andrews Air Force Base, boarded his plane down to Mar-a-Lago, and while he was on the air, he was on social media where he said, we are getting very close to meeting our objectives as we consider winding down our great military effort in the Middle East with respect to the terrorist regime of Iran. And then what he did in this post is to list, and you could see it's a block of text, but he listed 5 critical points. He claims that the Americans and the Israelis have completely degraded the Iranian missile capabilities, their launchers, everything else pertaining to them, that they have destroyed Iran's defense industrial base. That's the ability to manufacture more weapons, that they have eliminated Iran's navy and air force, including anti-aircraft weaponry, and then point 4, crucial, that Iran will never be allowed to return to even getting close to nuclear capability, and that the Americans are always in a position to quickly and powerfully react to such a situation. Well, that 4th point, the first 3, may be true because the military operation has been so huge. The 4th point is not provable at the moment because the enriched uranium is still in Iran and no one quite knows where it is, and the capability in Iran to rebuild is still there. So that 4th point, hard to do. The 5th point, protect allies in the region. And then there's the moment where the kicker, I guess, where he basically says, the Hormuz Strait, not my problem. Good luck, everyone else. You need to deal with that. He's claiming that American energy demand does not rely on the Hormuz Strait. Partially true, yes, America is self-sufficient with its own oil, its own gas reserves, but only partially true. And when the rest of the world is suffering economically, America obviously suffers as well. I guess in summary, I think critics of President Trump will see this as him saying, I'm off now, guys. Good luck. Over to you. He's broken it and he's not prepared to fix it. He's leaving it to everyone else.
Clearly saying that he'll consider winding down their great military efforts here in the Middle East. Mark, thank you very much for the moment. Well, let's take a look at what Downing Street has said tonight. Well, ministers condemned Iran's expansion of its targets to include international shipping. They agreed that Iran's reckless strikes, including on Red Ensign vessels and those of our close allies and Gulf partners, risked pushing the region further into crisis and worsening the economic impact being felt in the UK and around the world. They confirmed that the agreement for the US to use UK bases in the collective self-defence of the region includes US defensive operations to degrade the missile sites and capabilities being used to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They reaffirmed that the principles behind the UK's approach to the conflict remain the same. The UK remains committed to defending our people, our interests and our allies, acting in accordance with international law and not getting drawn into the wider conflict. Ministers underlined the need for urgent de-escalation and a swift resolution to the war. Well, our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin joins us in the studio. Nick, this seemingly, described by Kemi Badenoch as the mother of all U-turns.
Yeah, and the government are spitting feathers over that tonight. The government's, unofficially, privately saying this is a fluid situation, it's fast-moving, we need to make quick decisions. But it's quite a remarkable summary that Mark Stone just ran us through there of an indication of just how widespread the implications are of what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And the statement, Gillian, that you've just read by the government, there's actually an awful lot in this statement tonight which tells us just how much the government are having to manage this situation. Ministers met today ahead of the weekend to try and figure out where we are. We know that Iran has started to attack, in the words of the government, unarmed commercial vessels. Critical to this, ones that are flying the Red Ensign, British registrations, likely to have British citizens on them. That is raising the political stakes for the Prime Minister enormously, which is why this is a slightly toughened up version of what we've been hearing in the last week. They're calling it these reckless strikes. Now that we know that British vessels, British marine vessels could be getting struck in the Straits of Hormuz, it's really, really significant. And also that big one at the end, that giving the United States permission to use UK bases. I was chatting to Mark Stone just before we came on air. We think that what's new about that, because of course the US had been using British bases, is this final line in the statement, and capabilities being used to attack ships in the Straits of Hormuz. Donald Trump, as Mark was saying, might be keen to move away from the Straits, but the UK is very much now committed to it, and it is a huge headache for Britain to try and figure out not only how to protect assets there, but how to insulate British residents from the knock-on effects of what's happening. They were immediate, prices have gone up. Households will be watching this tonight, looking at their bills, thinking this is only going to get worse. It's going to get more expensive.
But the government keen to reiterate, Zoe, that their actions would be defensive rather than offensive in the aid that they're offering to the United States.
Of course, and they do underline the point about international law, which is the signal absence from any of Donald Trump's statements. He's got no interest in the international community at all, except when he pauses to call them deficient, which in many ways, from his point of view, they are deficient. You know, it's like nobody wanted his war, nobody wanted to go and line up behind him, and everybody would be pleased if it hadn't happened. So it's not that he's said anything particularly out of bounds or out of character in that, but it's a completely different approach. And the idea that the US and the UK could have a normal relationship of mutual support when one of them believes in international law and the other one doesn't is for the birds.
And we heard again today Donald Trump criticising NATO and other nations for not getting involved and saying that, you know, we will remember. But giving permission to use British bases, will that have placated President Trump somewhat today or not?
I mean, firstly, we all know that he's mercurial, to say the least. So it's a flattering description, frankly. Second, we know his attention span is incredibly brief. So, and third, we know that if he doesn't happen to like his principles one day, he's got new ones tomorrow. So you never know how long something like that will last. The fact is that if there are things he's going to remember, it's the fact that simply the United Kingdom and others said no. Now, a lot of people watching tonight will believe the United Kingdom was completely right to say no. I think that's what's going to stick in his mind. If the government believes that this slight gradual change of pace or of degree at this late stage is going to win him back over, I think they're probably mistaken. But the issue the government's really got now is they're right to say the government should be defending British interests. They're right to say the British military should be there to prevent attacks on British civilian vessels, British troops, British bases. But actually, they're still not doing that. They're still implicitly relying on the United States to do it. That's what's been agreed. They're going to let the United States use our bases to defend our interests on our behalf. And in that sense, they're still beholden to him.
And from Trump's point of view, this help that's come at this stage is far too late. And he's said as much several times. Well,
it's really strange because whilst this statement was being released, Donald Trump was standing outside the White House ready to board Marine One, and he was still pretty heavily critical of the Prime Minister, saying we were still too slow. So it seems like either the US didn't know that we'd put out this statement and we were making these offers of help, or whether it is just a line that Donald Trump wants to keep peddling, that we just weren't there when he wanted us. And no matter what we do now on, it doesn't really matter.
I mean, also, I would take issue with that idea that we're letting them use our bases in order to defend our interests. The only reason our interests are in jeopardy is because of Donald Trump's actions. You know, the Straits of Hormuz wouldn't be under threat if Iran hadn't been attacked by America.
Sure, but now it has been. But now they have been, and they are lashing out at our bases, our people in Cyprus, our ships going through the Straits of Hormuz, and our economy. We didn't start that, I completely agree, but now they're doing it.
I know, but I don't think...
Surely we should be stopping them firing missiles at British vessels.
I simply do not accept that if a war of aggression is started by the US, which has knock-on consequences for the British, and then the answer is we should be going out all guns blazing, defending our own interests, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, otherwise you're beholden to anybody who launches a war of aggression at any time.
So there shouldn't be a defensive option then?
Well, I mean, there is a defensive option, plainly, but you can't take it as your responsibility to mop up after Donald Trump infinitely.
So, but where the choice is either we do nothing... I mean, we chose before this war that everybody knew was coming. The US told us privately and the world publicly it was coming. We chose not even to send warships to the region to be able to shoot down incoming missiles. But now that that's happening, now those missiles are landing, now they're hitting our interest, now they're hitting Red Ensign flagged ships, now they're landing on British bases, we can either do nothing whatsoever, or we can try and interdict incoming fire as best as possible, but some of it will probably still get through, or we can let the United States, from its own bases or our own, try and stop those missiles being fired, which is it is an act of war in itself, or we can take an active step in that. But you're saying we should do none of those things?
No, I'm not saying we should do none of them. I'm just rejecting the frame in which we're, yet again, relying on the US to be our big brother, when in fact we're not relying on the US to be our big brother. We're reacting to a situation created by him in which nobody knows what his next move is going to be. He might say he's winding down. You know, tonight we're reacting to a situation that he created, just as he says he's kind of de-reacting to it. So the idea that we should be kind of grateful or in some way step up more for the US, I think is really peculiar.
I never say we should be grateful, but I think the first and most basic purpose of a nation's government is to defend its people, and
there is an attempt at diplomacy towards the end, a reaffirmation that the UK does not want to get drawn into a long, drawn-out conflict, and I think there will be a lot in government tonight looking at this and thinking that we are in a period where we're trying to embark on some economic damage limitation, because remember the thousands of households in Britain who are suffering because of what's happening here. So the government have an obligation to try and reduce that damage.
But might not be wanting to get drawn into a full-blown conflict. But then we have to think how Iran perceives this and allowing the use of British bases. In terms of Iran, they see that as involvement. It's a war against the US and her allies. So let's just take a look at that perspective from Iran. There's a message from Iran's supreme leader has been read on state TV to mark the Persian New Year. Mujtaba Khamenei has not been seen or heard publicly since his father, the previous supreme leader, was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has more from Tabriz in western Iran.
It is now the year 1405 and the Persian calendar, now that we have passed into the new year, that happened at sunset this evening. And normally, shortly after that happens, we hear from the supreme leader in Iran. This time round, we've only heard from him in the form of a written statement. Normally, it is a televised address from the supreme leader, but Mujtaba Khamenei, who has replaced his father, Ali Khamenei, as the supreme leader, chose not to appear in person or even release a recorded statement. His father, of course, was assassinated at the start of this war by Israeli airstrikes. Mujtaba Khamenei talked about, in this written statement that was read out by a news announcer, talked about the three wars, he says, that Iran has fought in the last year. He talked about the June-July war between Iran and Israel last year, and he talked about the attempted coup, as he called it, which he's referring to the social unrest, the uprising by thousands of Iranians on the streets of this country in January and February. And he talks about how Iran has defeated Zionist aggressors in those two wars. In this war that Iran is currently fighting, he talks about citizens standing bravely together despite their religious and political and cultural differences. He talks about his father joining the caravan of martyrs on a celestial journey, as he refers to the way his father was assassinated by the Israelis. He also talks about the attacks on Oman and Turkey that caused a lot of controversy in the last few weeks. Attacks, he says, were carried out by the Israelis and not by the Iranians. One of those attacks, a missile attack on Turkey, was shot down by NATO. I don't think it's so much the content of this speech, though, that's going to excite the most interest. It's the form in which it was given. Mujtaba Khamenei, according to the Americans, was badly injured in the airstrikes that killed his father, killed his mother, his wife, son and daughter. So this may be a sign that he's simply too unwell to appear in public or even give a recorded message, or it may be that he's chosen to do this out of an abundance of caution because of course, Iran's enemies, particularly the Israelis, have proven very effective at finding Iran's leaders, hunting them down and killing them one by one.
Still very many questions as to the whereabouts and the health of the new Supreme Leader, aren't there?
Yes, and let's bear in mind that his father, the previous Ayatollah, is still posting on Twitter, seemingly, with propaganda videos going out on his account from effectively as a kind of somewhat morbid sock puppet for the Iranian government. So we just don't know if this is really him. We don't know if he's what kind of health condition he's in. What we do know is that, yes, for all the perfectly justified criticisms of Donald Trump's decision-making, as a reminder, when he's talking about the solidarity of the Iranian people despite their political and religious differences, this is a regime that murdered tens of thousands of its own people on the streets only weeks ago, that spent decades raping, torturing, blinding people, women for showing their hair, gay people for loving who they love, young people for asking for things as basic as the vote. So it's a sick joke, as with so many dictatorships, to say all the Iranian people stand together.
We have had correspondent Dominic Baghorn, our international editor, in Iran, and we have seen pictures of very many people in support of the regime out on the streets and holding Donald Trump responsible for their demise.
It's incredibly difficult because there are the protest movements, which of course resulted in all those horrendous regime deaths before Trump's attacks. You know, that protest movement hasn't disappeared, but you cannot get on the streets, you cannot organise a mass protest movement under a bombardment. So what you're getting is instead a kind of very partial snapshot of a propagandised togetherness, which I don't think is actually going to suck the life out of the democracy movement in Iran, but it does present a picture of the country, which, as Mark says, is completely wrong. But, you know, the Ayatollah, the state of his health, we say we don't know what the state of his health is, and we have this written statement. But the reason we don't know isn't just because he's not been seen, it's because genuinely different statements are coming out all the time. The Americans have got 3 different versions of what might have happened to him, between he might have been killed to he might have just been wounded. One Iranian minister came out and said that he was in very good health, but he had been wounded. So with that level of transparency, which is to say none, it's very hard to see how a show of strength and unity is anything other than just a complete chimera.
Meanwhile, we are hearing sort of very bellicose talk coming out of Iran. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Syed Arashi, is saying that the vast majority of British people do not want any part in the Israel-US war of choice on Iran. Ignoring his own people, Mr Starmer is putting British lives in danger by allowing UK bases to be used for aggression against Iran. Iran will exercise its right to self-defence. Well, yes, I think, as I mentioned, we always said we have to bear in mind this is propaganda from a mass-murdering dictatorship. It's undoubtedly the case that Keir Starmer's decisions are not popular from all the polling evidence we can see, from all the discussions we see in here with the British people overall. People don't like Donald Trump. They don't largely back his decision on this matter. He's consciously choosing to do something that's out of step with that, because that's part of, and you know, I'm sure he would say that's part of leadership. Certainly not everything's a straw poll. But I think the other thing to bear in mind is that when Iran says, when the Iranian dictatorship says that's putting British lives at risk, nothing since 1979, the Islamic Revolution, has ever stopped the regime in Tehran sponsoring terrorism against the United Kingdom and its interests. It's only a few years ago that Hezbollah operatives were arrested in London with tons, literally tons, of the fertiliser required to manufacture explosives. There have been 20 terror plots linked to the IRGC disrupted in the UK since 2022 alone. That, frankly, wouldn't change either way. Look at the people they've been bombarding in the Gulf in response. They're not nations that have ever attacked them. They're lashing out, and that's what this regime does. Let's have a look at the tentacles of this war with Iran and elsewhere in Lebanon. Muslims there have been trying to celebrate Eid, the official end of the holy month of Ramadan. But with many families displaced by war and living under the constant threat of Israeli airstrikes, it's a desperately challenging time. Our international correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports from Beirut, and a warning, her report starts with images of children in distress.
Just as we've been filming there with these displaced people, 2 loud bangs. You can hear what seem to be Israeli jets above as well, and look at the fear. In Lebanon, even those who tried to flee war still can't escape it. Ruqayya has cheated death once already.
We were in Dahi when the Israelis ordered us to evacuate before they bombed it. So I took my son to Ramat al-Baida. Then Israel bombed us there as well, with children amongst us.
She was on the seafront in Beirut when an Israeli missile hit. She was injured, along with her 16-year-old son, Haroon. He still has shrapnel lodged in his head. How long do you think you can go on like this?
I can't endure any more of this. I feel as if my soul is about to leave my body.
Just as we're filming, another reminder of the constant threat here. There's instant panic. Parents grab hold of their children and start running for cover. They're terrified, confused and exposed. This is the reality of life now. Young minds surrounded by the sounds of war.
Ali, that was a bit scary. How are you?
I was scared because they were shooting. I was scared of the strike.
How do you feel when you hear the sounds?
I feel my heart shaking, trembling, and I start to cry.
It was sonic booms from Israeli jets designed as a show of force. The soundtrack of civilian life now, and lives in limbo. In just 3 weeks, more than 1 million people have been displaced.
By God's grace, my children and I are still alive. Thank God. May God help us. We were driven from place to place in this rain, and the children and I were soaked through. May God help everyone. What can people do? Everyone is just trying to save themselves. No one can live with war and shelling.
Communities are being pushed to the brink. An already fractured system is under massive strain. A minority of people are in government shelters, but they too are struggling.
Do you have enough of what you need here?
There is no hot water and I can't shower in here. I just clean him with wet wipes, and the only clothes I have for him are the ones I managed to bring.
The Israeli government says no one can return to South Lebanon until Hezbollah is disarmed. But the Iran-backed group continues to fire rockets into Israel. It is the second time in 2 years many families here have had to flee, caught in the middle of a war with no idea when it will end. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Beirut, Lebanon.
When you look at the stats, those numbers, nearly 1 million people displaced in just 3 weeks and more than 1,000 killed.
Yeah, it's a complete disregard for people's lives. I mean, you cannot say to an area this large and this populated, everybody leave because we might want to bomb you. I mean, it cannot be without consequence. It's so devastating, and it will cause. You know, this is what's so galling about Donald Trump saying he might wind it down, because he could well stop all military operations in Iran tomorrow, and the consequences of those actions would still be being felt 10 years from now.
The Israelis saying that the campaign in Lebanon will not stop until they've completely decimated Hezbollah. I mean, how is that achieved, and then how is that even measured?
Well, they're saying, as the report said, until Hezbollah is disarmed, which is now, for the first time in many years, also the view of the Lebanese government, because Hezbollah, as an Iranian-sponsored terrorist organisation, has for decades subverted Lebanese democracy, overthrown effectively the Lebanese state in large parts of Lebanon, replaced the military and effectively hijacked a whole tranche of a country. Something I would very strongly disagree with Zoe about is that we talked earlier about international law and the law of war. These evacuation orders are not because we want to bomb you. They're precisely because the IDF and the Israeli Air Force do not want to bomb the civilians there. That's why they're saying
Yeah, but we saw so many times in Gaza, ordinary Gazan citizens being told to evacuate from one area to another, being bombed and killed on their way from one area to another, and when they came back, having no homes and starving to death. So the idea that this is like some humanitarian move by Israel because all they're looking for is one tiny little group is, I don't think...
The opposite of one tiny little group, as I was just saying, a really massive militia that's overthrown half of a country for decades.
In very recent history, Mark, we've seen what how careful Israel is with civilian lives when it orders an evacuation. And I don't think it's acceptable to say, oh, they're doing it to be nice. This is 1 million people.
Why do you think Israel is saying in the south of Lebanon to people, this area is going to become a combat zone where we intend to target Hezbollah?
It's not acceptable. Not acceptable.
But you've just been saying why they are and are not doing it.
What I'm
why are they
saying to
doing
you is it's not acceptable to say to an area this large, you're a combat zone now, look after yourselves.
So it's preferable not to say...
It's preferable not to bomb people.
It's preferable not to bomb Hezbollah.
Yes. It's preferable not to bomb anybody.
But just to ask the question, if Hezbollah is within the population, what then is the answer?
Well, look, my answer is always human security first. If you've got a terrorist problem, you deal with them in a human security first way, which is don't kill anybody. Don't kill anybody. Bring people to trial. If you want to bring people to trial, bring people to international trial. Although I'd like to see Israel in an international court of law in the right seat.
Who is clapping the handcuffs? I'd love to see Hezbollah's leadership and all of its many thousands of terrorist troops in the international courts. Who's clapping the handcuffs on and how? Because you're saying no one should go there to fight them. The Lebanese government can't.
Nobody. I'm saying if you're telling me that it's so urgent to kill Hezbollah that any number of collateral damage, any number of citizen collateral deaths,
which I'm not telling you, so we can address that.
I know, but I think in the very recent past, we've seen what happened in Gaza, and scores of thousands of people died so that some people could be killed.
Okay, but
that's not acceptable to me.
With respect, Zoe, I'm debating things that you are saying, and you're debating things that you seem to imagine you prefer that I would say that I'm not, and that's not getting us.
That's actually not true.
We are going to have to leave it there just because of time. We'll continue this in the break, but we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for you. Do stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching The Wrap. We're going to take you through some of the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers now. Well, Keir Starmer's decision to let America use bases to strike Iran features on the front of The Times. The Guardian leads with further criticism from Donald Trump as he brands NATO cowards. Adding to the ongoing situation in the Middle East is the front page of The Telegraph, with Donald Trump considering putting American troops on the ground. On the front page of The Eye is a warning from economists of further tax rises in response to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The Financial Times looks at the concern over borrowing costs, which have reached their highest level since 2008. The Daily Express focuses on the delays to the assisted dying bill as the House of Lords continues debates about the legislation. On the front of the Mirror is a message from the mum of Ricky Hatton as the inquest into his death concludes. That story also features on the front page of The Star. And The Sun has an exclusive story about the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh subletting converted stables. A royal source has told Sky News in response to that story the property in question is not rented to any tenant and is not on the market. OK, well, let's take you through some of those papers now. We're going to start with the Telegraph front page. And this article is saying that Donald Trump is ready to put boots on the ground. Yesterday, I was reporting that he was absolutely not going to do that, which is correct. Where are we, Mark?
And 25 minutes ago, we were all hearing from him, as we were just discussing, that he's winding down. I mean, as I was saying a little earlier, the fact is he's completely inconsistent. He has an incredibly short attention span. His mood and attitudes on things swing all over the place. And it's quite evident that he had no idea what he was going to do at the outset. Remember, it's not that long ago that he was saying that Lloyd's of London, the insurers, were cowards for not insuring ships to go through the Straits of Hormuz. The US Navy would escort people through. And the US Navy isn't escorting people through because they're now talking about maybe having to put boots on the ground simply to make the Straits in any way accessible.
Yeah, and also this piece talking about plans to seize Carg Island, which certainly doesn't sound like winding down.
Well, it doesn't sound like winding down, and it doesn't sound like the war objectives such as they've been explained, even though they haven't actually been explained by either Pete Hegseth or Donald Trump. You know, everybody assumed, he certainly went in as though he were the great defender of democracy and he was trying to generate some kind of popular movement against the Ayatollah.
Well, seemingly it was about regime change.
Yeah, it was about regime change.
That's what they said, but that has evolved and we don't know what the objectives are.
Then it seemed to be, let's kill this generation of leaders, the next generation of leaders, and most of the generation of leaders after that, which seems like a strange way to affect regime change.
And then he was going to want to have a vote on the next Ayatollah.
Yeah, then he wanted to Venezuela it and say, yeah, I'm going to go and then I'll be in charge. And now, as soon as they start talking about Carg Island, it looks like a kind of just really brute resource grab. You know, it's the world's largest oil field. Why would America be focusing their war objectives on it, if not for resource reasons? So, the things that would concern me are, A, the tergiversations, every single 25 minutes is a different objective. 2, how self-interested it looks. So the problem with the self-interested war is that it's always more expensive than it is rewarding. And so you get into these kind of sunk cost fallacies where you've lost so much money and so much life that you can't get out. And the kind of sense that one gets that Donald Trump is sort of losing the plot, even more than normal.
It does seem as though he is preparing himself to announce victory so that he can so that he can get out of this situation. But saying that, criticising NATO and saying that you haven't helped us, even though he had said we'd won the war originally, we don't need your help. Yes, we do need your help. This is a complete mess, isn't it?
Yes, and not for the first time, and not for the last time, sadly. There was a great cartoon, I think it might have been in The Spectator last week, that had Donald Trump in a trench with all the NATO leaders saying, "You're cowards, you're idiots, you're effete, you're woke." And then the next pane was him rushing over the top shouting, "Follow me." And he seems unsurprised that nobody's doing so. I mean, this should be a reminder to him, something he should know because he was on the other side of it a few weeks ago, that war does not require a bilateral agreement to start. It does not require a bilateral agreement to continue. He can declare victory, just like, I mean, we all remember George W. Bush under the mission accomplished banner on the aircraft carrier.
I know, but he was mocked for that, like, horribly.
He was, but you can say, mission accomplished, we're packing up and going home, but that doesn't mean the war ends. And as Mark Stone was saying earlier, the fact is that they can say that they have no interest in the Straits of Hormuz or global energy supply or what happens outside their borders, but they do. And unfortunately, you know, when it used to be said, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. When America punches itself in the face, everybody gets a black eye. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. And it's much easier to start a war than it is to finish one.
And he has, again, been very critical of Britain. You know, Keir Starmer has come to his aid, but much too slowly, and very, very critical, again, of Sir Keir Starmer. And this is, well, I don't know if that criticism has come before the announcement that he could use British bases. US forces could use British bases.
Yeah, because they seem to be contemporaneous, right?
Yeah.
Because he was on the flight when when Downing Street released the statement.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, I find it so undignified to be in this situation where we're wondering whereabouts on a plane Donald Trump was, and maybe whether he hadn't heard his briefing, or maybe whether he wasn't listening, or he was playing candy floss instead. You know, it's such a catastrophic waste of our young lives that we're wondering what Donald Trump is thinking, because he never thinks the same thing for 5 minutes straight. But, yeah, I don't think their relationship has improved. I think he's kind of getting he's partly getting a kick out of slating Keir, and has done ever since he said he was no Winston Churchill. I mean, nobody thought Keir was Winston Churchill, but Donald Trump...
Well, he said he's a very nice man, though.
Yeah, I mean, they used to... Apparently, last summer, they actually got on. They used to chat on the phone socially. But I don't think that's true anymore. But
the offer of British bases, will that take the temperature down?
I doubt it. I mean, so I'm still flabbergasted that Zoe kindly described me as young, which is very, very, very good of you. But
I was being sarcastic about myself, but truthful about you.
Oh, there we are. That's why I'll return the favour. You know, the fact is that this is, I think for Keir Starmer, this is now the worst of both worlds position to be in. If you thought that we should be better prepared, or even on the front foot, or even involved from the outset, you'll think, like Donald Trump thinks, too little, too late, we don't like people who turn up once the job's already done, blah, 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 blah. If you think we should have nothing to do with this, or with Trump, or with the Americans whatsoever, ever, we're now over that line too, and Keir Starmer's falling between both stools. And I think what that suggests is, it all goes back ultimately to being unprepared. I don't think... It's February the 11th when the Americans asked us if we would be involved and we could, if they could use our bases. It was also during February the British ambassador to Israel told the Foreign Office and the government that Israel and the United States were going to be doing this. And the British government didn't seem to really think through where it wanted to be. It didn't even decide to send a destroyer to the Eastern Mediterranean to defend Cyprus in case a missile came over. And I think they're still living with the consequences of that indecision.
In the beginning, Sir Keir Starmer was emphatic about where he wanted to be. He didn't agree with this war, and he didn't want to get involved because it breached international law as he saw it.
But I think he could have, for example, the Royal Navy proposed during February that maybe we should send a destroyer in that direction to do what we've done before, not to be involved in direct action against Iranian targets, but to shoot down missiles that were coming towards us or our allies. And the government decided to pass up that option, and that ultimately, that among other elements of unpreparedness, has left them, firstly, a passenger, and secondly, racing to catch up with whatever position they want to be in. They're still, you know, we're seeing these kind of little baby steps weeks afterwards. I don't think it's going to win brownie points to the White House if you wanted to do it. It's not going to satisfy the position that we should stay completely out either if people want to do that, and they're falling between two stools.
Too little, too
Which makes
late.
a change from sitting on a fence, I suppose. It's a different experience.
Different metaphor. It kind of is the same. Just very quickly, let's talk about energy costs. Could get so bad that taxes have to be raised. This is front page of the Eye, Zoe.
I think this is sort of, as Mark describes Keir's indecisiveness and how weak he looks, there's something about the fact that British cabinet ministers are tearing their hair out about how expensive things are about to get. You know, the average energy price bill is likely to hit £2,000 a year. That's going to have a knock-on effect on hospitality, on leisure activity, on hospitals, on schools, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and it's going to have an effect on government spending at a time when government borrowing is extremely high. But the tearing their hair out is the kind of chilling bit of that metaphor, because they don't have an answer. There isn't an answer to these shocks. All you can do is react. It's a little bit like a pandemic, dealing with a war like this.
Mark, very quickly on this.
I think there's things you can do to at least improve your odds. For example, every major political party in Britain has deliberately pursued a policy for almost 20 years now of increasing energy costs as being a desirable goal through taxes, through levies, through supply decisions, through regulation. That has made us more vulnerable to this. It simply has. And whether you want more out of the more oil and gas out of the North Sea, whether you want more renewables faster, either way, it's left us really vulnerable to a shock like this.
Hang on a sec, you said there are things you can do, and then you tried to go back in time and do those things now. What would you do now if you're a cabinet minister?
I think there's very little they can do now.
Exactly.
On those things. But
I think you agree. You agree. We're going to stop there because
that.
you agree. There's very little to be done. There's very little to be done. We are going to move on from energy bills. Average energy bills will rise by about £332 in July. Very worrying for a lot of people. Let's take a look at meningitis. And you'll all be aware of the scare with 2 deaths and the numbers increasing of those diagnosed. Well, health officials say students in Kent could incubate meningitis and spread it to other parts of the UK. There are now 29 confirmed and suspected cases. Our health correspondent Laura Bundock spoke over the phone to a meningitis patient who's currently in hospital.
It's been really frightening, to be fair. Like, you know, it could have killed me. Like, you know, I just thought perhaps I had a flu or COVID or something. But yeah, the fact that it nearly killed me is quite scary because, you know, I'd have left behind my family, my friends, and, you know, my whole life sort of thing. I could have had a lot of serious side effects. You know, could have been a lot worse.
That's 21-year-old Keely Goodwin there, as she said in her own words, it could have killed her.
Yes, absolutely terrifying. And we can see these dreadful stories of people who've been suffering from this outbreak. We heard from the father of one of the young women who's died, urging there to be better provision and wider uptake of preventative treatments as well. And it hugely scary for people affected by this. I mean, something so dangerous, and also, you know, disease that affects anybody like this is awful, but also something that affects the young, I think, does have a really distinct and deep impact on society.
So what about the response? More than 2,500 people have been successfully vaccinated now.
Yeah, there was a meningitis outbreak at my university when I started in, like, 91, and somebody lost their hearing. And it was... I was thinking about it because there was nobody scrambled for a vaccine response. Everybody just sort of looked at it, and I mean, I'm basically saying public health is better now. The vaccine responses are faster. People take more responsibility for themselves. I think parents are probably a bit more neurotic and, like, you know, at getting their kids to stop sharing vapes and start getting vaccines. So you know, it's a horrible thing, and I really don't envy anybody whose kids are at Kent, or indeed the kids who are at Kent. But obviously, I'm looking at this from a very selfish point of view.
Despite being so young.
Yeah, but it is, you know, I do think people are much more clued up about what vaccines they need to take and what vaccines they will take.
And certainly people are taking up the vaccines. The queues snaking around the centres is proof of that. We're going to take a break. When we come back, why Harry Maguire's England recall turned into a night to forget for Manchester United.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
Sky News has been given exclusive data showing every Palestinian who has been killed in Gaza since the war began. Our analysis of this pattern in the killings suggests that entire families were wiped out in their homes or shelters. The data and forensics team is a multi-skilled unit dedicated to providing transparent journalism from Sky News. We located footage of the aid drop to a tent camp in central Gaza.
These airdrops are falling in extremely populated areas.
We combine traditional reporting with advanced analysis of satellite imagery, social media, and other open source information. Now, this is just one of the strikes and incidents we've been able to geolocate across Gaza. Sky News has found Nazi speeches and marching music have been used as background sound on tens of thousands of TikTok videos as far-right groups try and spread their message. Sky News has seen 72,000 posts used in this way. There's no evidence yet of foul play at Heathrow. It shows weaknesses that enemies could take advantage of. Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. Supporters say it saves lives and projects American power and influence.
I think we would generally be called far right, sure.
It's called Return to the Land, and they invited me in.
A lot of people are going to be, why are you making Nazi references? Right. Well, why wouldn't I?
Its founder says he is building a fortress for the white race.
It's a racial association. I kind of want to ask you, after seeing this, do you think what we're doing is immoral?
We followed a social media trail that led us to Bristol, where a confrontation between protesters erupted into a full-scale riot.
Here it really is pitched battle skirmishes, hurling missiles, throwing punches.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Time now to catch up on all the very latest sports news with Roger.
After 4 bids, the latest thought to be £15 million, Liverpool insist they're still talking to Villa.
I was captain of a massive football club at Aston Villa. I've been there 10, 11 years. Your brain starts ticking a bit. Are you ready for a new challenge?
What is happening with Gareth Barry?
I was talking with Martin O'Neill privately before, so he knows our ideas clearly.
Rafa phoned me up, offered me a host of players that I didn't really want. That's not the name of the game.
We didn't have the funding to complete it.
Then it was a case of, right, what do I need to do to get the move done?
It was just like lobbing a hand grenade in.
I was fuming.
Fined 2 weeks' wages, banned from the training ground.
If he'd gone to Liverpool in the manner in which he did, he wouldn't have gone with my blessing. I would never have spoken to him again.
To make that so personal against Martin O'Neill, I'm amazed he ever actually played for Aston Villa again.
Who would have thought Gareth Barry's Villa career would come to this?
There were chants of Judas, booed every time he touched the ball.
Mentally, it was a real tough period. I regret doing some things.
If you got into the Champions League, would you stay?
If we're playing Champions League football at Aston Villa, then there's no need to look elsewhere anyway.
Would that be a definite?
Yeah, it'd have to be a definite now, wouldn't it? Liverpool was still there a year later. Arsenal come as well.
It was a huge message that Manchester City was serious.
They made me feel wanted, and the ambition is the main thing.
You know what means money, money, money.
I did take a lot of stick to win the FA Cup, to win the Premier League. It was a big relief to win a trophy in your career.
From youth team player to Premiership regular is rarely an easy one. It's certainly a busy time for Gareth Barry, with a 5-year senior contract waiting for him at Villa Park.
The manager's had a word to me about it, but hopefully I'll be signing it soon.
Something you're clearly wanting to stay at Villa?
Yeah, I want to be staying at Villa for a few years to come.
I was really shy, thinking I should be back in the youth team dressing room rather than making my debut and training with the first team every day. It sort of come really fast and took me probably 2 seasons to really feel like I should be there.
Gareth was, I mean, he was only a young kid when he came, and before we knew it, he was in the first team changing room. Very quiet until I got hold of him.
He's such a level-headed kid that I don't mind talking about a 17-year-old boy because nothing would daunt him.
He suddenly joined the first team squad and he just looked at home. Nothing seemed to faze him. You can always tell because of the senior players suddenly started talking about him. Oh, Gaffer, he's decent, isn't he, you know? You'd say something to Gareth and he'd either say yes or no. That was it, really. You'd say, like, you enjoying it, training with the first team? He'd say, yeah. And that was it.
I can just
When we come back, Donald Trump declares it's not America's responsibility to police the Strait of Hormuz. Stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what? Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Tonight on The Wrap, is Trump drawing down in the Middle East? The US president says he's considering winding down his military operation against Iran as the UK approves the use of its bases by America to strike Iranian sites targeting the Strait of Hormuz. Tonight, Trump has said the response is too late.
I was a little surprised at the UK, to be honest with you. They should have acted a lot faster.
Conflict in the Middle East could push up power bills here in the UK by more than £300 this summer, piling pressure on the government to provide support for households. Plus, an inquest concludes the former boxing champion Ricky Hatton had been looking forward to the future, and it's not clear that he intended to take his own life. In sport, a dramatic night on the South Coast as Bournemouth twice come from behind to hold Manchester United to a 2-2 draw. We discuss the day's biggest stories with Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and a chief executive of the Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including concerns the Middle East war could lead to soaring borrowing costs for the UK. Good evening. We are now at the end of the third week of the Iran war. The country's regime is still standing and the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. But for how long? Tonight, the UK government agreed to let the US use British bases to strike Iranian sites targeting the key shipping lane. But in the past half hour, Donald Trump said it was up to other nations to protect it. He added that he's considering winding down that military operation in the Middle East while sending more troops to the region. Confused, we should be, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's so galling to hear him say it's up to other nations to protect the Straits of Hormuz. Like, the only point of that is the discharge of energy, and we already have our own energy. This entire situation was created by the suddenness of this conflict, and it wouldn't have happened without it.
Much uncertainty tonight.
Yes, not least in the White House itself, seemingly. They're sending more troops. They might put boots on the ground. They're withdrawing. Help's too late. It's annoying that nobody's helping. Donald Trump, not for the first or last time, is all over the place. And Keir Starmer's running in circles trying to catch up. Well,
shall we get the very latest from our US correspondent, Mark Stone, from Washington, D.C.?
It looks as though this is the clearest indication yet of an off-ramp, but this is a president who changes his mind sometimes by the minute, who contradicts himself minute by minute, and who also bluffs when he wants to, when he needs to. Look, it's 3 weeks to the evening since Donald Trump surprised everyone and chose that moment when the talks were taking place in Geneva between the Americans and the Iranians. He chose that moment to ditch the talks and to launch military action alongside the Israelis. 3 weeks on, I think we do, as I say, have a clearer indication than any before that he is done with this. Now, is that because he genuinely believes he has achieved all his aims, or is it actually because some of the aims have been achieved and the unintended consequences, the global economic consequences, have been so profound and so quick? When he was on the South Lawn an hour or so ago, he said, we've knocked out their Navy, their Air Force, we've knocked out their anti-aircraft, we've knocked out everything, we are roaming free. He then got on board Marine One, flew to Andrews Air Force Base, boarded his plane down to Mar-a-Lago, and while he was on the air, he was on social media where he said, we are getting very close to meeting our objectives as we consider winding down our great military effort in the Middle East with respect to the terrorist regime of Iran. And then what he did in this post is to list, and you could see it's a block of text, but he listed 5 critical points. He claims that the Americans and the Israelis have completely degraded the Iranian missile capabilities, their launchers, everything else pertaining to them, that they have destroyed Iran's defense industrial base. That's the ability to manufacture more weapons, that they have eliminated Iran's navy and air force, including anti-aircraft weaponry, and then point 4, crucial, that Iran will never be allowed to return to even getting close to nuclear capability, and that the Americans are always in a position to quickly and powerfully react to such a situation. Well, that fourth point, the first three, may be true because the military operation has been so huge. The fourth point is not provable at the moment because the enriched uranium is still in Iran and no one quite knows where it is, and the capability in Iran to rebuild is still there. So that fourth point, hard to do. The fifth point, protect allies in the region. And then there's the moment where the kicker, I guess, where he basically says, the Hormuz Strait, not my problem. Good luck, everyone else. You need to deal with that. He's claiming that American energy demand does not rely on the Hormuz Strait. Partially true, yes, America is self-sufficient with its own oil, its own gas reserves, but only partially true. And when the rest of the world is suffering economically, America obviously suffers as well. So I guess in summary, I think critics of President Trump will see this as him saying, I'm off now, guys. Good luck. Over to you. He's broken it, and he's not prepared to fix it. He's leaving it to everyone else.
Yeah, those words, the Hormuz Strait, will have to be guarded and policed as necessary by other nations who use it. Very telling indeed. Let's take a look at what Downing Street have had to say tonight. They say in a statement, ministers condemned Iran's expansion of its targets to include international shipping. They agreed that Iran's reckless strikes, including on Red Ensign vessels and those of our close allies and Gulf partners, risked pushing the region further into crisis and worsening the economic impact being felt in the UK and around the world. They confirmed that the agreement for the US to use UK bases in the collective self-defence of the region includes US defensive operations to degrade the missile sites and capabilities being used to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, our people and politics correspondent Nick Martin has joined us. That quite detailed statement from the UK, but has been described as a complete U-turn, the mother of all U-turns, by Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition.
Yeah, it came out because ministers met today to try to come with an up-to-date strategy on how to respond to this in the coming weeks. And Downing Street then released a statement just a few hours ago. And as you just said, Gillian, as you just read, there's actually quite a lot in there. There's a lot in there overtly, but there's a lot in there when we read between the lines as well. Clearly, there's a lot of upset about what the government see as a sort of escalation in where Iran are pointing these missiles. Up until, today or yesterday, it was military installations. Now the government are very upset because Iran is starting to target what it calls unarmed commercial vessels, especially ones that are flying the Red Ensign, which means that they're British registered and likely to have British citizens on board. And I think that does raise the stakes for the Prime Minister and the government to try and recalibrate how they deal with this crisis in the Straits of Hormuz. And then there's obviously that line about giving the United States permission to use their bases. You wouldn't have got a sense of that when you heard from Donald Trump a couple of hours ago, who was giving an interview on the rear lawn there of the White House, who still is saying that the British have just been too slow. So I'm not sure he's seen this, this statement at all. But then there are the British households who are facing those huge hikes in bills. And I think that is what focuses many of the minds of British people here in Britain about how their fuel prices have gone up and just the immediate impact that this conflict has had. And I think that is why Britain has to take a more focused role in what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz. And then there was a bit of a diplomatic nod to we must de-escalate. We can't get drawn into a wider war, but inevitably they have to be. There's no choice.
And on some of the front pages, how that economic impact will affect people in the UK, suggestions that taxes might have to rise as a result of this war.
Yes, and we can already see that the government is paying taxpayers are paying £13 billion a month on debt interest, and the cost of government borrowing has just gone up to the highest rate since 2008. Highest rate since the financial crisis. Think of all the turbulence we've seen in the years since then. In any of those scenarios, even Liz Truss's government, in terms of impact on borrowing costs for government, left in the dust by what's currently happening. and it could well get even worse.
And this being described as the biggest energy shock ever.
Yeah, I think the thing is, when you look at it in terms of energy prices, then people say, don't panic, don't panic. It's not as high. It's still not as high as winter 22, 23. When you look at it in terms of the yields on gilts and bonds, it's like, don't panic, don't panic. The markets do react. But when you look at it in terms of the size of an energy shock it is, a lot of people in energy markets are saying it's the biggest energy shock there's ever been. So, yeah, I mean, everybody's really worried.
And it's so unpredictable because we have no way of predicting the direction of the politics, because we've got Donald Trump saying we're going to put boots on the ground. Actually, no, we're not going to put boots on the ground. We need help. No, we don't need help. The war's already won. We have no indication of how long this could go on for.
I think that's one of the reasons why this government has been slightly more cautious than perhaps some people would have wanted them to. Certainly Donald Trump would have wanted them to. What we have here is a government who has learned lessons from the past, does not want to just immediately storm in there and become involved in a big war. We are naturally becoming involved. We hear it a lot on a defensive measure. We are sending assets to the region, etc. The government will have, on the home front, that impact on the cost of living for people. They will have that very much at the forefront of their minds. But I think the government have to play a bit of a tightrope here. How much do they get involved? To what extent do they get involved? How much will that cost? Does that increase the risk for citizens in Britain? There are all sorts of considerations that the government have to consider.
Well, certainly that's the threat from Iran, that Sir Keir Starmer is putting British lives at risk by allowing the US to use British bases.
That's the threat from Iran. That's the propaganda line from Iran. But there's two things we know about this. Firstly, for many, many years, almost ever since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the IRGC and the Iranian regime has sponsored terrorism targeting Britain and British targets. We've seen Hezbollah operatives arrested in London a few years ago with literally tons of fertiliser ingredient for explosives. We've seen 20 plots since 2022 sponsored by the IRGC disrupted in this country alone. The second thing we know is that Iran doesn't care if you're attacking Iran, if you're guilty, if you're a Trump ally or not. Look at all their neighbours they've bombarded over the last 3 weeks who've never lifted a finger against them. They're going to lash out as in any way they see fit. And that's going to continue regardless of what the United Kingdom does.
Yes, the war rages on as we speak, and debris from an interception has struck the old city of Jerusalem, near some of the world's holiest sites, revered by Jews and Muslims alike. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi witnessed the moment of impact.
That landed.
So we're heading to the impact site now. The police have just opened up the cordon and they're letting people through, including the press, so we're going to head on over and have a look. Now, we were at the office, we were working on something else at the time, and we heard the emergency alerts on our phone, and then we saw the interceptors go up, which we managed to film, and then the most enormous explosion.
During these hours, hundreds, sometimes thousands, are at the holy sites. If that missile had hit directly without being intercepted, it could have caused a mass casualty disaster.
We're being pushed back further now, but we're told that this is fragments from an Iranian missile which caused the damage. We'll see if we can get a bit closer and show you the actual impact site. You get a view of where it landed from here. Right, really, in the old city, around where we are some of the holiest sites in the world. We saw interceptions above us, and that's what it is, or that's what it was over there. We're now being allowed into the inner cordon to see the actual impact site. You see there's plenty of press here. So down here, you can see where the impact was. There's a massive hole where it struck, and there are plenty of soldiers here now trying to assess the damage. It's pretty chaotic. Can you tell me what happened?
It just hit the next to the football pitch there, and what was that?
Is it? Everybody's okay?
Everyone's okay. No one got hurt.
It must have been quite a fright.
Yeah, I was pretty scared. Taking a shower.
And the kids, they play there every day. My son and his brother, every day they're in that miglas in the field, the soccer field that's right below. Every day they're there because it's Friday, Erev Shabbat, everyone's getting ready for Shabbos. They weren't there, thank God.
So it's lucky no one was hurt.
Very lucky. They're usually there from the afternoon all evening playing.
This is the Jewish quarter of the old city.
Yes.
Can you just explain what that means and where we are and put it in context?
The holiest place in the world, it's simple. The holiest place in the world next to the Western Wall, so just the most important place in the world for us. So never got hit before here, so it's pretty scary. I'm now pretty scared it's going to hit my house or something, or my mom's car, or whatever it is.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says that Israel and America are winning and Iran's missiles have been degraded, but yet we're seeing
I don't know.
this happen.
I don't want to get into politics because that's. I don't believe anything Netanyahu says. I don't think he's righteous. But anyway, we're in danger. Wherever it's coming from, it's dangerous and scary.
Certainly dangerous because that's the interception of a missile, the debris from an interception, but actually some missiles are getting through.
Indeed, and another missile, as a reminder that while we talk geopolitics and energy markets, this is about, with attacks like that, indiscriminate missile fire into civilian areas and, extremely holy for many, many people, religious sites. It's good fortune, good luck, as was mentioned there by some of the people who witnessed it. It's also good fortune that Israel has the technological capacity, has that Iron Dome and those interceptor systems to help to knock these down. They knocked down thousands of these missiles that fired indiscriminately at civilians.
I mean, it's very interesting with Iran because they obviously they were going to bomb Israel, but they started the campaign with bombing people who were on the fence or even leaning towards an alliance with them,
It's almost like they're a crazy death cult.
Well, it is almost like they're not picking their friends. Like even crazed death cults try and keep like an axis of alliance, right?
Well, they haven't been firing at Russia, so they haven't been firing at North Korea. So they have a certain axis.
I think firing at Dubai at the start, launching those kind of indiscriminate attacks in the Middle East.
But they will say they weren't attacking those neighbouring countries per se. It's because of the US bases, and that's why they became a target.
I think they just lost a lot of friends when they didn't need to. But they probably by now would have lost a lot of friends. I'm just interested in what their foreign policy is, I suppose.
Part of the unspoken truth of this, and this is complicated within the politics of the Middle East by people's simultaneous dislike of or opposition to Israel, is that many, many Muslim majority and Muslim nations in the Middle East are absolutely sick to death of the Ayatollah, the mullahs, and the nature of that regime, and have been for a very long time. Not just those with sectarian differences from the Iranian regime, but those who nominally are on the same same religious tradition. They're absolutely sick to death of that. And that's what's fascinating about this. And I think actually it's kind of implicit in the way Iran reacted. And some of those targets they chose, that on paper it might seem surprising, but I think Tehran knows that too. They know that these are not their friends because they have very few friends in the region because of the nature of the regime.
I know, but no, Mark, come on, you're deliberately misconstruing me. It wasn't that they like fallen out at a kid's party.
No,
it was more that those alliances are fragile, but alliances are also necessary. So you don't just indiscriminately bomb people who haven't yet been open about their opposition to you, whether they don't like you.
Oh, I agree it was foolhardy and counterproductive. I agree with you on that. I'm not seeking to misrepresent you at all on that. It's fascinating, but it does speak to the nature of that regime at its heart.
Yeah, and worth noting that at one point Iran did actually apologise to their neighbours for striking them.
All of them?
Specifically, I think it was UAE.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was UAE. We're going to take a break. on that note. And when we come back, much more from the papers, including the inquest into the former boxing world champion Ricky Hatton, saying that he had symptoms of a brain disease before his death.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it. As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Hello again. The inquest into the death of Ricky Hatton has found he may not have intended to take his own life. The 46-year-old former boxing world champion, known as the Hitman, was found unresponsive at his home in Manchester last September. Our North of England correspondent Katie Barnfield was at the coroner's court.
This is what we learned from the inquest into Ricky Hatton's death. His cause of death was found to be hanging, but not suicide. The coroner, Alison Much, said although she was sure that he took his own life, she could not be sure that he intended to, and that was for a few reasons. Firstly, there was alcohol in his system when he died, twice the drink-drive limit. Second, he hadn't left a note or said anything to his family. And then there were brain changes picked up by the pathologist at his post-mortem, consistent with something called CTE. That's a brain disease caused by repeated head trauma, often from contact sports like boxing. It can cause mood swings, forgetfulness and confusion, things his family had said they'd noticed in him before he died. The coroner said she couldn't be sure how much that had contributed to his death.
We also heard how much of a shock Ricky Hatton's death was to his family. They cried when the conclusion was read out, and in statements to the court, they spoke of how much they loved him. His son Campbell talked about his struggles with mental health and with drugs and alcohol, but said before his death he'd been in the best place he'd been in years. While his former partner, Jennifer, the mother of his 2 daughters, said when they went for a family dinner on the 12th of September, 2 days before he was found dead, he'd seemed completely normal. We also heard from the police about the hours leading up to his death. DS Helen Grigolis from Greater Manchester Police said he hadn't met his driver as expected for an event on the 13th of September. It was then the morning of the 14th of September. His manager Paul Speake arrived to pick him up for a flight to Dubai for his comeback bout. When he didn't answer the phone or the door, he used his key, and it was then he found him in the games room of his home in Hyde in Greater Manchester. Ricky Hatton was a hugely popular boxer, known as the People's Champion. Thousands turned out on the streets for his funeral in October last year. He'll be missed not only by his family, but by his many, many fans.
Yeah, the hitman, very, very sad case indeed, and compounded by the fact that the coroner is saying she couldn't be confident that he intended to take his own life.
Yes, I mean, as you say, compounding this really sad loss of such a talented star in his sport. And I mean, one of our businesses, we published a book last year called Death of a Boxer, which explores, in which a journalist reveals an awful lot about not just what drives people to have this love for boxing, the decision to get in the ring, but also that really long, complex tale of health impact it can have on people afterwards. I mean, but for his family, even now to not get resolution from this process must be heartbreaking.
Yeah, very sad for the family, isn't it?
It's terribly sad for the family, but I also think that families, if you can avoid a verdict of suicide, families do families prefer an accident to a deliberate taking of one's own life.
And well, the evidence that we have now, there are obviously questions to be called into this case that will be forever unanswered for the families, won't they? Yes, and obviously there was a huge outpouring of grief from his fans, not just in this country but around the world. But ultimately, that's a family, former partner, and children who lost one of the people very closest to them. Yeah, Ricky the Hitman is title there that people affectionately called him. Well, if you've been affected by anything that Katie just told us in her report, you can contact the Samaritans at any time on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. Let's take a look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for you now. Well, Keir Starmer's decision to let America use bases to strike Iran features on the front of The Times. The Guardian leads with further criticism from Donald Trump as he brands NATO cowards. Adding to the ongoing situation in the Middle East is the front page of The Telegraph, with Donald Trump considering putting American troops on the ground. On the front page of The Eye is a warning from economists of further tax rises in response to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The Financial Times looks at the concern over borrowing costs, which have reached the highest level since 2008. The Daily Express focuses on the delays to the assisted dying bill as the House of Lords continues debates about the legislation. On the front of the Mirror is a message from the mother of Ricky Hatton as the inquest into his death concludes. That story also features on the front page of The Star, and The Sun has an exclusive story about the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh subletting converted stables. A rural source has told Sky News in response to that story, the property in question is not rented to any tenant and is not on the market. So let's take you through the front pages, and we'll start with the Telegraph front page. Donald Trump ready to put boots on the ground today. Yesterday, he was saying the absolute opposite, that there's no way there would be ground troops on the ground in Iran.
Yes, in an unlikely collision of Donald Trump and quantum theory, this is Schrodinger's victory. He's finished the job, he's got it done, he's withdrawing, he's getting troops on the ground, it's all fine, he doesn't need any help. He's furious at allies because they keep not saying they'll help. it's almost like he's all over the place and rushed into one of the biggest disruptions to the global order in decades without having thought it through or understood the nature of the challenge.
But what is clear is that he is wanting an off-ramp now. I mean, I think we can agree on that, can we? Or
can we, though? Because this is not an off-ramp, this is an on-ramp. I mean, what I think is worrying, I mean, of all the things to worry about, this might sound quite abstruse, but the problem with Donald Trump changing his mind, saying completely different things from one day to the next, making no sense, talking ungrammatically, etc., is that it sort of pollutes the credibility of everybody. It pollutes the credibility of all the newspapers around him, of all the newspapers in the world, on the world stage, because you read it and you think, can that be right? Did they definitely get the right end of the stick? He makes everybody less trustworthy and more stupid around him.
But it's a deliberate tactic on his part, isn't it, to keep everybody guessing. And that's, well, it has been described as one of his strengths, because the enemy never knows whether he's really going to do what he says he is.
Yeah, the problem with the mad dog strategy is there's a mad dog running around, which isn't traditionally great for everybody, for anybody. I think, look, maybe that's sometimes the case if we're being very charitable, but I think what we're really seeing is that what Donald Trump has an unlovely habit of doing is looking at where he's got to and then reverse engineering history to say, well, that's what I set out to do, and look, it's exactly where we've ended up. And if you look at what he originally said he was doing, compared to those things in his social media post today, those 5 things he said were his goals, and they're also his achievements, what he's saying is that the United States is committing itself permanently to what the Israelis used to call mowing the lawn, which was the way the Israeli shorthand for their strategy when it came to dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah, that every now and then they would keep having to take out a layer of leadership, they'd keep having to take out a layer of capability.
But in his statement, though, he's saying the opposite, because he's saying, actually, the Strait of Hormuz, we don't really use it that much, so it's up to you lot to police it.
But this is what I mean in terms of that fundamental inconsistency. Remember, where he's talking about, well, it's up to you lot to police the Strait of Hormuz, it's only days, maybe 10 days, if we're stretching back that far ago, that he was saying that they didn't need insurers from Lloyd's of London to insure global shipping. The United States Navy would escort tankers through the Straits. And sometime between then and now, but remarkably not before he started this, someone at the US Department of the Navy has had the gall and enough PowerPoint slides to explain to him that they literally cannot do it. That's what I mean. I think he's reverse engineering whatever he's done repeatedly to declare that was his goal. And once you've started a war, it's not so you can't unilaterally stop it.
He's not alone in changing his mind, though. We've got Sir Keir Starmer now saying that the US can use British bases.
Yes, and if Keir Starmer did this with, I mean, the kindest possible reading is your reading, which is that he did it recognising that British lives were in danger, and therefore he had to come in behind Donald Trump, and it was a duty to ally with the people who Iran was at war with. The least kind reading is that he just couldn't decide at the beginning. He's bowing to pressure. He's bowing to pressure too late from Donald Trump. He thinks it's going to curry him back his special relationship. It isn't. And so, frankly, Donald Trump, even if he notices that the British have changed our minds, is probably going to forget tomorrow anyway.
I'm going to take a break on that net. Much more from the papers coming up when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching The Wrap. More newspapers now for you with Mark and Zoe. We can take a look at the Financial Times front page. Borrowing costs reach an 18-year high. Repercussions of the war in Iran, Mark.
Yes, these are the latest repercussions of the war, but as we were saying earlier, or as I was saying earlier, this is a good example of a kind of vulnerability that we've baked into our own system. At the start of this war, we were spending £13 billion a month on debt interest for the state. If you were a baby born at the start of the millennium, you were born with an £11,000 share of national debt to your name. It's now over £40,000. And new borrowing, which we're still having to do despite tax receipts, the tax take being the 70-year high, we're still having to borrow, and now it's as costly as it's been since 2008. So this is piling up and up and up, and people wonder why they pay so much and they get so little. It's because we're just paying the interest off.
Fears of inflation shock, mortgage deals being pulled, gilts hit 5%.
Yeah. No, it's not pretty, and it's extremely squeaky for the government because they only just finished those. Yeah, Rachel Reeves coming out with slightly, marginally better figures than she was expecting, and now that's going to be completely torpedoed by this, I would think.
Yeah.
Are we looking at a kind of slow motion repeat of the Liz Truss disaster? I don't think so.
But the rate on gilt is now worse than Liz Truss by quite a long way.
Yeah. But
and it was already bad before this began.
That multi-crisis. Didn't three markets crash in the same weekend? The pensions, the gilts, and I can't remember the third one. Anyway, I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I think it might be that bad, only slower.
But I suppose Rachel Reeves can say that a lot of it isn't of her making, or you're saying otherwise?
Voters hate that. Voters hate being told it's not your fault. Because you know...
And actually, I think it's debatable to the degree to which that's true. She didn't cause the war in Iran. She didn't drive the very latest spike, but things were already bad and getting worse. We were already paying £13 billion a month in debt interest. Go and look at what we spend on defence or education or police and compare it just to paying interest on stuff from living beyond our means. Let's
move away from Iran to the Telegraph and the Home Office trying to block new security for Prince Harry, we read. So take us into this.
So basically, I don't want to show my hand. Obviously, I'm completely neutral on the matter of the British press and the Prince and Meghan. I mean, Harry and Meghan. But and I think they probably are right. They probably do need security when they come to the UK.
There's a but coming.
But the Home Office just doesn't want to give it to them. And this has come up before. I think Harry threatened to sue once. And now they're saying they can't come over without this security. And civil servants at the Home Office are saying that they don't want to give them taxpayer-funded security. Now, I guess the new argument, although they're not so tactless as to make it, is, well, he's not coming to see his dad, so why should he get
the taxpayer
close protection?
What do you think?
No, I think if you're, whoever you are, if you're a particular risk of crime or terrorism, as we've been talking a lot about in the show, obviously the police have a duty to try and protect you. But ultimately, Harry and Meghan opted out of the royal family. They went on their global privacy tour in the media instead.
Can you opt out of the royal family?
Well, they chose to give up that position and those responsibilities.
Still a member of the royal family.
But in that circumstance, I don't think this should be decided in that sense by the Royal and VIP Executive Committee that allocates these resources. They want to be treated as ordinary citizens. They should be given the same assessment as ordinary citizens. I agree there should be some protection there because they're obviously potentially at risk.
I don't know enough about bodyguards, I have to admit, to
surprise,
to adjudicate on this.
Yours is in the green room.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm a huge national hate figure. Is there a level between, you know, the full caboodle, the full team, the guys with the watches that they can speak into, and just people, and it being recognised that you're a figure of some risk and therefore you need protection? Is there any kind of thing between those two positions, or is it all or nothing?
My understanding as a layperson is that there are specific units in the police that provide royal, political and diplomatic protection, the kind of close protection teams that you get around the Defence Secretary, Northern Ireland Secretary, former Prime Ministers. And then there's police forces allocating certain degree of police presence to particular events or particular people. If you or I were to phone the police and say there was a threat, an active threat to kill us, right?
Yeah.
So there's different functions, but I mean, part of the difficulty is that, I mean, certainly it seems in here that the Prince is saying that his court case was an establishment stitch-up, and I understand why this looms large in his mind, but it's bound in with all of these tensions.
And I suppose the public might not be all that sympathetic because they probably think that he can afford for his protection.
And that he kind of said, you know, sling your hook to the public when it came to his royal duties and all the rest of it. He didn't want anything.
And I wonder whether people do really want to kill him.
On that question, we're going to move on. Talking about,
I'm relieved not to be asked to speculate on that one, at least.
UK energy bills are forecast to rise by more than £300 this summer, as we've been saying, as the Middle East conflict pushes up wholesale natural gas prices. For more, here's our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso. Take a look.
This is a forecast from Cornwall Insight, who've been very reliable predictors of where Ofgem, the regulator which sets the consumer price cap, which is intended to protect us from precisely the kind of price volatility we're seeing at the moment. They have a new forecast today. We can show you how it looks. It's the red bar at screen right. This shows us the energy price cap as it's been set over the last 5 years. You can see the days of £1,000 being the cost of an annual energy bill for the average household are long gone. We're not at the same heights we saw in 23 when in the aftermath of the Ukraine invasion by Russia, but the price cap is forecast to increase. Today's assessment is to £1,973. That's from the current price cap, or rather the price cap that will apply from April the 1st through to the end of June, which is just under £1,650. So that's a 20% increase. The price cap that will apply for the spring was actually a 7% decline in price. You can see how the war in the Gulf has radically altered expectations. It's because the price cap is set essentially Ofgem, and what Cornwall Insight here are doing is monitoring wholesale gas prices, which don't just determine what you pay to switch on your hob or pay for your home heating. They have a central role in setting the price of electricity, which makes it gas perhaps the most important commodity in what we pay as consumers. Rising energy prices for consumers and for industry means the likelihood of rising inflation. That means the likelihood of higher interest rates. We saw the Bank of England hold rates yesterday, but warn that we could be entering another inflationary cycle. That has not been well received by the markets, which now have set the price of government borrowing, which we look at essentially through yields on 10-year bonds. They have hit their highest rate this morning since the aftermath of the financial crisis in 2008. They're higher than they were after the Liz Truss's mini budget. There is the expectation of inflation, an inflationary spike, to the extent of which we simply cannot know. We're already baking in some of these price rises in consumer bills because energy companies are doing the contracts for gas now that they will sell to us in future. If this disruption continues, and particularly the tit-for-tat attacks on energy infrastructure in the Gulf that could take years to resolve, this upward price pressure may only just be beginning.
Yeah, an inflation spike definitely on the way. Mortgage costs going up. People are really going to be hit in their pockets. And we don't know how far it will go because we don't know when this war is going to come to an end.
And what it's not going to do is the government any favours, because they would just... There's been this ongoing question of how Keir Starmer personally managed to get so unpopular across so many different interest groups and across such a breadth of political spectrum. But the government's issue is different. People are just disappointed and they don't feel that it's delivering what it set out to deliver. Now, you know, they arrived saying, oh, we've popped the bonnet and the engine's much more screwed than we've thought. Then they said, we've been hit by many more shocks than we thought. Then they kind of had a load of personal scandals that derailed their agenda. But there's just only so many times you can blame a big boy did it and then ran away. I mean, it's, you know, it doesn't work.
But it has come at a time, just at a time, when it seemed that things were turning and on the up for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, almost on the brink of some growth.
I'm not convinced that that's the case. I mean, we saw effectively 0% change in January. We saw 0.1% change in February. We saw 0.1%. We saw a decline over the last 12 months announced this week in employment, in the number of people, payrolled employees. And that's even after, when you dig into the figures, that actually it's worse in the private sector, and some of the only growing sectors are parts of the public sector. And actually the growth and tax-generating parts of the economy are shrinking even faster, and effectively public spending decisions are flattering what are already bad employment decisions.
But wasn't there a point where the figures were looking better than expected for the Chancellor?
I think so. One thing that did look better than expected for the Chancellor was at the start of the year, which was that she had better than expected tax revenues.
Of course.
And the tax revenues were better than expected. However, some of that seemed to be about tax planning, with people trying to get ahead of what they thought was going to be even higher tax rates. But also, even with those higher tax benefits, we are still borrowing unexpectedly more. And when you look at some of these, you know, I agree with Zoe when she says there's only so many times you can say a big boy did it and ran away. Last year, energy companies told Parliament, even if wholesale gas falls to zero, if it's free, tax bills, energy bills are still going up.
We must leave it there, Mark and Zoe. We have to leave it there. Thank you both. Hold that breath. Coming up at